From the very beginning, you were taught that acceptance depended on erasure. You learned to smile when you wanted to cry, to give when you longed to keep, to agree when every fiber of your being wanted to resist. Do you not remember the sting of being called selfish when you were only protecting yourself? How many times were you punished for saying no and praised for saying yes, even when it broke you? This is the hidden origin of the empath, not simply sensitivity, but survival. You were not permitted to be whole, so you amputated parts of yourself. You buried anger, desire, boundaries, all in the name of goodness. But what kind of goodness is born from fear? What kind of compassion grows from repression? And can you not already feel how much of your so-called empathy is the echo of a child's strategy to stay loved? Jung's warning pierces here. What you repress will return. What you deny will rule you. You silenced selfishness, but it has lived in your shadow, twisting your giving into compulsion, your kindness into servitude. Every false yes you speak is that child inside you still afraid that love can only be bought with self-betrayal. So the severe questions rise. How long will you keep mistaking this wound for virtue? How many more years will you bleed yourself to preserve bonds that were never safe? And most urgently, will you dare now to be selfish, to claim your own life? Or will you remain forever the child who was never allowed to exist whole? You grew up in a world that demanded your compliance before you even knew what selfhood meant. When you cried, you were told to hush. When you protested, you were scolded. When you asked for more, you were shamed. Slowly you learned the rule: belonging required silence. Love required sacrifice. Safety required the erasure of need. And is this not the origin of so much of your empathy today? That your care for others was born not of freedom, but of fear. Carl Jung warned that the persona, the mask you wear for approval, forms in childhood as protection. For you, that mask was goodness. You smiled when you wanted to shout, gave when you longed to keep, endured when you needed to refuse. Adults praised you for being mature, kind, patient, easy. But beneath their praise, what was lost? Did they ever ask what it cost you to carry their comfort on shoulders too young to bear it? The empath's adulthood repeats this same script. You pour yourself out in workplaces, relationships, families, friendships, always available, endlessly giving, afraid that a single selfish act will shatter the bond. How often have you kept quiet when you should have spoken? How many times have you given beyond your strength because the guilt of saying no felt unbearable? And do you not already feel the quiet resentment building beneath the surface? Proof that your compassion is still bound to that frightened child who was never allowed to be whole. The context is merciless. You are not simply generous by nature. You were trained to survive by erasing yourself. The very empathy that others praise is rooted in the repression of your shadow, in the silencing of your natural impulses to protect, assert, and desire. You became the light for everyone else because you were never permitted to carry your own. So the sharp question confronts you: will you continue confusing this training with virtue, or will you recognize it as the wound it truly is? For until you reclaim the right to be selfish in balance, you remain the child who was never allowed to live, and every act of empathy will carry the hidden cost of your own erasure. Carl Jung's psychology gives you a mirror to see why your empathy often feels more like servitude than strength. Beneath every yes you gave as a child, beneath every smile you forced when you wanted to cry, lies an archetypal pattern. You were never simply born as the empath. You were shaped, sculpted by repression, fear, and the silent bargain that your safety depended on your self-erasure. To see this clearly, you must confront the structures Jung identified: persona, shadow, complexes, projection, and the self. Persona, the mask of goodness. The persona is the mask you learned to wear in order to be accepted. For you, it was the mask of the good child, quiet, helpful, agreeable. You were praised when you conformed, punished when you resisted. Slowly, you learned that survival required pretending.
Even now, do you not notice how quickly you smile when you are uncomfortable? How often do you agree simply to avoid conflict? How many times have you apologized without fault only to preserve harmony? The persona kept you safe as a child, but as an adult, it suffocates. Every time you wear it, you bury a little more of your true self. Shadow, the banished selfishness. Jung taught that whatever you repress does not disappear. It becomes shadow.
The selfishness you were denied in childhood, the desire to keep to rest, to say no, was exiled into your unconscious. Yet it has not vanished. It lives in resentment, in exhaustion, in bursts of anger that surprise even you. Do you not feel the tension each time you want to refuse but cannot? Do you not sense the silent fury beneath your endless patience? Your shadow is not your enemy. It is the voice of the child demanding to exist. To deny it further is not virtue but repression, and repression always returns with vengeance. Complexes, the chains of old wounds. A complex is a knot of memory and emotion formed around a wound. For the empath, it is the selfishness complex. As a child, you were made to believe that asking for more, protecting yourself, or showing anger would cost you love. This wound shaped every choice that followed. You became compulsive in giving, terrified of rejection if you faltered. Ask yourself, how many of your adult relationships are still ruled by the fear of being abandoned if you stop serving? How often do you confuse loyalty with slavery? Jung reminds you, a complex is not destiny, but until it is made conscious, it rules you. Projection, attracting what you deny. Because you deny selfishness, you attract those who embody it. You repress dominance, and so you find yourself surrounded by the domineering. You silence your anger, and so you invite those who rage freely. You bury your desire, and so you pair with those who take without shame. Have you not wondered why narcissists, manipulators, and takers seem drawn to you? It is not accident, it is projection. They live the qualities you exile. They feed on your light because you refuse to claim your shadow. Until you own your right to say no, you will continue to meet others who demand you do not. The self. The demand for wholeness. At the center of Jung's map lies the self, the totality of who you are meant to become. The self does not ask you to abandon empathy. It demands that you balance it with strength. Wholeness is not endless giving. It is proportioned care joined with boundaries, compassion tempered by truth, generosity matched with the right to protect yourself. Do you not already sense that the path of pure selflessness is destroying you? Do you not feel the exhaustion, the hidden resentment, the quiet longing to be free? These are not failures. They are the self demanding integration. Individuation, the journey to wholeness, requires that you reclaim what childhood stole, the right to be selfish in balance. The structure of the wound. Taken together, Jung's foundations reveal the full structure of your empathy. Persona keeps you trapped in the mask of goodness. Shadow hides your selfishness and anger. Complexes chain you to childhood wounds of abandonment and guilt. Projection draws takers to exploit your denial. And the self keeps calling you to integration, refusing to let you rest in erasure. Is it any wonder you feel both praised and invisible, needed yet drained, loved yet unseen? So the piercing questions rise. How long will you confuse repression with virtue? How many more times will you call your exhaustion compassion? How much longer will you attract predators simply because you refuse to own your own shadow? And most urgently, will you claim the right to wholeness now? Or will you continue living as the child who was never allowed to be selfish? Because Jung's warning is merciless. What you refuse to integrate will rule you. But his promise is clear as well. Once you reclaim the shadow, dissolve the complex, withdraw the projections, and answer the self's demand, you are no longer prey. Your empathy ceases to be compulsion. It becomes conscious choice.
You become not the child trapped in goodness, but the adult who lives whole, carrying both light and shadow, compassion and strength. The final truth is severe but liberating. The empath is not broken by selfishness. They are broken by its absence. Your task is not to extinguish empathy, but to allow selfishness its rightful place in your wholeness. Only then can you give without depletion, love without resentment, and live without erasure.
The theories become clearest when you trace them into the scenes of your daily life. You do not live in abstract concepts. You live in workrooms, kitchens, bedrooms, and friendships where the wound plays out. Jung's map is mercilessly practical. Every complex, every persona, every shadow erupts in behavior you repeat until you see it. Consider these typical examples and ask yourself how many of them echo your own life.
Workplace, the silent burden. At work, you are praised for being dependable. You cover mistakes, smooth conflicts, and carry hidden labor so that others may shine. Your boss commends you for being a team player. Yet, how often does anyone ask if you are exhausted? How many times have you worked late, unpaid, because you feared saying no would brand you selfish? When a colleague cuts corners, you step in quietly. When deadlines collapse, you sacrifice sleep. You tell yourself it is duty. But is it not the same rule you learned as a child, that your worth is measured by what you surrender? The praise feels warm for a moment, but underneath you feel the cold truth. Your competence is exploited, your silence mistaken for consent. Romantic relationships, love as submission. In relationships, the pattern deepens. You give endlessly, time, attention, patience, hoping it will be returned. But when you protest neglect, you are told you are too sensitive or demanding. How many times have you apologized simply for having needs? How often have you stayed, believing that love meant endurance, even as you shrank? When you finally set a boundary, the response is rage or withdrawal. And so you learn to compromise again, to erase yourself, to buy affection with silence.
Ask yourself, is this truly love, or is it the repetition of childhood? The terror that saying no will cost you belonging. Family, the eternal peacemaker. Family dynamics reveal the wound most starkly. Perhaps you were the child who kept peace in chaos, the one who smoothed arguments, took blame, or distracted anger. As an adult, you still play this role, mediating disputes, absorbing tension, keeping quiet so as not to add to the burden. How often have you left family gatherings feeling hollow, unseen, or even punished for the smallest assertion of truth? You call it loyalty, but is it not bondage? The continuation of a script you never wrote. You still believe that harmony depends on your silence. But is it harmony if it costs your soul? Friendships. The listener who is never heard. In friendships, you are the confidant. People pour their sorrows into you, and you listen with patience and care. But when was the last time someone asked how you truly were? How many times have you left conversations feeling drained, carrying burdens that were not yours while your own voice remained unheard? You tell yourself it is generosity, but in truth it is fear. The fear that if you stopped giving, the bond would vanish. Do you not see that such friendships are not built on love, but on your silence? The turning point when you finally say no. In each of these arenas, work, love, family, friendship, the pattern holds until it collapses. One day you refuse. You decline to work late. You tell a partner you cannot endure neglect. You confront family dysfunction. You stop answering calls that drain you. And instantly the mask shatters. You are called selfish, cold, ungrateful, changed. But ask yourself, is it selfish to stop carrying what was never yours? Or is it truth breaking through repression? Jung reminds you what you repress will erupt. That eruption is not betrayal, it is survival. The pattern beneath them all. The details differ, but the structure is constant. As a child, you were taught that selfhood was dangerous. As an adult, you reenact the lesson. You erase yourself to keep peace, love, and safety. Others thrive on the labor you give freely. Then when you stop, they accuse you of cruelty. But the cruelty was never yours. It was theirs disguised as virtue. The collapse of the mask feels catastrophic, but it is revelation. Harmony built on your erasure was never harmony. Love that demanded silence was never love. Friendship that ignored your voice was never friendship. So the severe questions cut through how many of your bonds survive only because you betray yourself. How many structures, workplaces, families, romances stand tall only because you pour in labor that is never acknowledged? How many times have you called erasure kindness when in truth it was submission? And most urgently, when you finally stop, will you collapse in bitterness? Or will you recognize the collapse as the first breath of freedom? Jung's mirror in everyday life. Jung warned that what is denied in the individual will be carried by the collective. Your denied selfishness is carried by colleagues, partners, families, friends, each one demanding you give what you refuse yourself. The cycle ends only when you reclaim what you buried. Do you not already feel this demand pressing on you that your soul will not tolerate another year of self-erasure? The examples are not coincidences, they are mirrors. They reveal that your so-called empathy is too often the residue of a child's survival strategy. The truth is merciless, but liberating. When you stop feeding others with your silence, their resentment reveals the nature of the bond. What collapses was never real. What survives is purified. You are not destroyed, you are revealed. The final question remains, will you continue to live as the child who was never allowed to be selfish, repeating the same script in every corner of your life? Or will you finally claim the right to say no to protect yourself, to live whole? Because until you do, every workplace, relationship, family, and friendship will keep demanding the same sacrifice, yourself. And Jung's warning echoes. You will either reclaim it or you will lose it forever. The wound of the empath is not random. It follows a strict psychological sequence that begins in childhood and repeats through adulthood until you confront it. Jung's insight is clear. What you repress does not disappear. It governs you unconsciously. If you were never allowed to be selfish, the repression of that natural impulse becomes the very mechanism that shapes your adult life. Look closely at these layers and ask yourself where you are trapped within them. Psychological repression of selfishness. As a child, your desire to claim space, to say no to protect yourself, was branded dangerous. You learned to bury selfishness in the unconscious. On the surface, you wore the persona of kindness, compliance, generosity. Beneath the shadow grew heavier with anger, envy, desire for freedom. Every time you repress these instincts, they do not vanish, they fester. Is this not why your kindness so often feels forced, heavy, exhausting? You are not simply compassionate. You are overcompensating for the parts of yourself you were forbidden to live. How many false yeses have you spoken in order to silence the no screaming inside you? Emotional guilt as leash. The repression breeds guilt. Any flicker of selfishness triggers shame. If I say no, will I be abandoned? If I speak my need, will I be unloved? Guilt becomes the leash by which others control you, but more tragically, it becomes the leash by which you control yourself.
You feel selfish not only when you protect your boundaries, but even when you think about protecting them. Ask yourself, how many times have you swallowed truth because guilt felt heavier than silence? How many hours of rest, how many dreams, how many joys have you denied yourself because the child inside you still trembles at the threat of rejection? Behavioral compulsive giving. Out of guilt emerges compulsion. You give not from freedom, but from fear. You say yes reflexively, rush to rescue, smooth over conflicts, anticipate others' needs before they speak. People call you kind, but is it kindness if it is compulsive? Or is it servitude rooted in terror of disapproval? Think of how many times you have said yes with a smile, but inside resentment boiled. That resentment is not evidence of your flaw. It is evidence that your giving is not free. How many relationships in your life survive only because you compulsively sustain them at your own expense? Ethical collusion disguised as virtue. Your compulsive giving enables corruption. Families remain dysfunctional because you absorb conflict. Workplaces exploit because you never protest. Partners neglect because you forgive endlessly. You tell yourself it is virtue, but is it not collusion? By silencing yourself, you allow injustice to grow unchecked. By covering failures, you keep others from facing the consequences that could force growth. By carrying burdens that are not yours, you prevent others from carrying their own. The cost is not only your exhaustion, but also their stagnation. Do you not see that your silence, praised as kindness, is in truth participation in corruption? Existential collapse of the self. At the deepest level, this mechanism devours you. Each day you betray yourself, you carve away another piece of your life. Jung called this the tragedy of the unlived life. The child forbidden to be selfish grows into the adult who never claims the self. One morning you wake hollow, realizing you have lived for everyone else while starving yourself. Collapse arrives suddenly, but was always inevitable. The breakdown, the fury, the withdrawal, the disappearance. To others, it looks like betrayal. To you, it feels like the end of endurance. Do you not already sense this collapse approaching? The weight of years of silence pressing like a storm against your chest. The interlocking cycle. Each of these layers feeds the next. Repression breeds guilt. Guilt fuels compulsive giving. Compulsion enables corruption. Corruption deepens repression. And the cycle repeats until collapse interrupts it violently. You call it burnout, breakdown, depression, but is it not the shadow demanding to be lived? Is it not your own soul breaking the prison of false goodness? Ask yourself, where in this cycle are you now? Are you still repressing? Are you trapped in guilt? Are you compulsively giving? Are you enabling corruption? Or are you already at collapse, where silence shatters and the hidden self erupts? The merciless truth of the mechanism. This cycle explains why your empathy feels like burden, why your kindness feels hollow, why your relationships feel draining. You are not simply empathic, you are repeating the childhood script that survival required. And every structure in your life, workplace, family, romance, friendship, thrives on this repetition. Others do not resent your giving, they depend on it. The tragedy is that they never see the child beneath the one who learned early that selfishness meant exile. So the piercing questions return. How long will you call self-erasure love? How many more years will you feed corruption with your silence? How much longer will you collapse under guilt instead of confronting it? And most urgently, will you end this cycle consciously, or will you wait until collapse ends it for you? Jung's warning echoes here. What you repress will rule you. What you deny will consume you. The empath is not a saint. They are the child who was never allowed to be selfish. Until you reclaim that forbidden part, every act of giving remains chained to fear. The only way out of the mechanism is through it, by reclaiming selfishness as part of your wholeness. Because the truth is severe. You will either choose to break the cycle, or the cycle will break you. The question is not whether collapse comes. The question is whether you will call it destruction or rebirth. If the empath is the child who is never allowed to be selfish, then your path forward is not endless sacrifice, it is reclamation. Jung reminds you that individuation, the process of becoming whole, demands you gather the rejected pieces of yourself and integrate them. That means reclaiming selfishness, not as corruption, but as balance. The task is not easy. It will feel unnatural, even dangerous, because the child within you still fears punishment. Yet without these steps, you will remain locked in the cycle of repression, guilt, compulsion, and collapse. Observation. Naming the pattern. The first act of freedom is seeing clearly. Track when your giving is fueled by fear, not love. How many times today did you say yes simply to avoid rejection? How many conversations left you drained because you silenced your truth? How often did you feel resentment bubbling beneath a smile? This awareness is not indulgence, it is revelation. Each observation pulls back the mask of goodness and shows the mechanics of your erasure. Ask yourself each night, did I give because I chose to, or because I feared the cost of refusal? Boundaries. Practicing the sacred no. The word you were never allowed to speak as a child must now become sacred no. You cannot wait for courage to feel natural. You must practice it until it does. Begin with small refusals. Declining an invitation. Refusing to cover someone's mistake. Protecting 1 hour of solitude. Do not explain, do not justify. Each no is an act of fidelity to yourself. How many times have you betrayed yourself because you could not endure the discomfort of saying no? How much longer will you deny your own life to preserve fragile illusions of peace? Shadow work, claiming the forbidden self, selfishness, anger, desire, all the traits you were punished for remain alive in your shadow. To ignore them is to stay enslaved. Write them, speak them, confess them to yourself without shame. Admit that you long to rest, to be served, to receive, to refuse. Do you not feel the relief even in imagining it? The shadow does not destroy you, it protects you. By claiming it consciously, you free it from erupting unconsciously. The question is not whether you have selfishness, it is whether you will claim it with discipline or let it rule you from the dark. Reframe, redefining virtue. You were trained to believe selfishness is sin. But is it sin to rest? To refuse exploitation? To protect your body and soul? Reframe selfishness not as corruption, but as proportion. Compassion without boundaries is not virtue, it is decay. Generosity without truth is not love, it is collusion. Ask yourself how many of your kind acts are really bargains for approval. How many of your sacrifices are not chosen but coerced by guilt? The true moral act is not endless giving, it is balanced giving, where your yes is rooted in freedom, not compulsion. Daily fidelity, small acts of wholeness. Transformation does not happen in grand gestures, but in daily acts. Each day choose one act that preserves you. One no spoken, one truth voiced, 1 hour of solitude guarded, one desire honored. These small fidelities accumulate into sovereignty. Each evening ask yourself, did I betray myself today, or did I honor myself? Over time, this question reshapes your entire life. Do you not already sense that collapse comes when daily betrayals pile too high? And do you not see how daily fidelity prevents collapse before it arrives? Relationships, testing bonds through truth. When you change, others will reveal themselves. Some will call you selfish, accuse you of being cold, resent your boundaries. Others will adapt, respect you, remain. Do not fear this test, it is purification. Who collapses when you stop erasing yourself was never rooted in love.
Who grows stronger when you claim yourself is true ally. Ask yourself, who in your life celebrates your boundaries and who resents them? Who grows smaller when you protect yourself and who grows alongside you? Will you cling to those who demand your erasure, or will you honor yourself enough to release them? Service, giving without collapse. Your empathy is not meant to vanish, it is meant to be purified. Once bound by boundaries, your giving becomes luminous, not depleting. You can serve without resentment, love without exhaustion, contribute without collapse. Ask yourself, where can I give today without losing myself? Where does my generosity flow from fullness rather than fear? Where does my compassion heal instead of corrode? Service that costs you yourself is corruption. Service that flows from wholeness is sacred. Integration, choosing rebirth over ruin. Each of these steps, observation, boundaries, shadow work, reframing, fidelity, relational testing, purified service, leads to the same end, integration. The child within you was never allowed to be selfish. The adult within you must now reclaim that right. Otherwise, the cycle will repeat until collapse destroys what is left. Do you not already sense the urgency? Do you not feel that your soul is demanding balance? The question is no longer whether you will face this work. It is whether you will face it consciously choosing rebirth, or unconsciously through collapse. Because Jung's warning is merciless. What you repress will return, and what you deny will rule you. The practical path is not glamorous, but it is severe and necessary. Daily, disciplined acts of wholeness are the only way forward. The empath who refuses this path remains the child who was never allowed to be selfish. But the empath who chooses it becomes adult, whole, sovereign, unbreakable. So the pressing question confronts you now. Will you keep repeating the childhood script until collapse consumes you? Or will you finally dare to live as one who belongs not to others' demands, but to yourself? You began life silenced, told that selfishness was sin, trained to equate love with erasure. But what Jung revealed is unrelenting. What you repress will return, and what you deny will enslave you. The empath is not saint by nature. They are child by wound, carrying the sentence of never being allowed to exist fully. Every false yes you speak, every exhaustion you mask, every resentment you swallow is that child still obeying the command to disappear. But adulthood demands a different path. You cannot remain prisoner of a script written for your survival decades ago. You cannot keep calling collapse compassion. You cannot keep bleeding for bonds that thrive only on your silence. Ask yourself, how many more years will you give to patterns that deplete you? How many times will you confuse servitude for love? How long will you let guilt chain you to roles that consume your soul? The truth is severe. You are not destroyed by selfishness. You are destroyed by its absence. To reclaim it is not corruption, it is balance. To honor your boundaries is not betrayal, it is fidelity. To protect your light is not cruelty, it is necessity. Jung's final message is this: the only way to become whole is to accept every part of yourself, including the selfish child you were forced to bury. So the piercing call to action presses today: choose one act of selfishness. Speak one no without guilt. Protect 1 hour of solitude. Refuse one demand that drains you. Do not wait for collapse to liberate you. Begin now. Because the final warning is merciless. If you do not reclaim the selfish child, you will remain forever fractured, praised yet invisible, needed yet unseen. The choice is already before you. Will you keep betraying yourself in the name of virtue, or will you finally live whole, carrying both your empathy and your right to exist?